Hey, this is Amanda from The Fundamental Home, and today I am doing another video for the Virtual Homeschool Co-op, and this week we are talking about reading lists. And before I get started, I just want to say that Trish, the wonderful, virtuous head of the Virtual Homeschool Co-op, is actually in Florida, and she is in the midst of all of the storms, and her family is having a difficult time. So if you would please pray for Trish, just that her family will get through the storms and will be able to get through it with as little difficulty as possible. And I wanted to mention that because I've seen her Facebook posts and I know what's happening there. So I just want to send some love out to Trish in the form of prayers for her and her family. And the dogs bark, but that's just how it is here. So you guys are used to it. Anyway, we're talking about reading lists today. And I have like a little envelope here that I wrote everything on because I'm organized that way this morning. But anyway, basically there were a lot of different questions about the reading lists, and I kind of make my own reading list. I have books that I feel that my children need to read, and I'm a big reader. I read a lot. And so I have books that I think are necessary for them, not just for the educational benefit in terms of learning comprehension, but for character lessons. And those books, I have a very specific idea of kind of the order that I want them to go in, but I don't have it like nailed down that it has to be this, this, and that in this certain order. But I thought I would share with you the books that I think are important. The first and the most important, the one that all of my children have done, is Little House on the Prairie series. The Little House on the Prairie series, we read through every single book, and I just think there's so much good information within the books, historically, culturally, in terms of values. I absolutely love those books. They're mandatory in my household. I remember them being read to me when I was in 3rd grade by Mrs. Shannon, and it really made an impact on my life. So another series that I think is important that I've read through with both of my boys, I'm currently reading through with Brianna, is the Little Women series. And again, we read all of the books. Little Women, Little Men, Joe's Boys, we've read all of those. And again, I think there's so much value in terms of character. I love them. I probably am going to say that about all of these, but the C.S. Lewis books, and when I'm talking about those, I'm talking about the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe series. Not a lot of value in terms of values. But what I do think is good about the C.S. Lewis Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe series is there are a lot of, it's not exactly an allegory, C.S. Lewis even said that it wasn't, but there's a lot of things that you can relate to scripture, and I think it kind of broadens their mind from something that's just a straight biography to something where there's little subtle nuances and you can make connections, and it begins to help them understand things that are bigger than what's exactly on the paper. So I really like that series for that. And in the same way, once you get down the line, the Witch and the Wardrobe series, which again is every book, and every member of my family likes a different one, by the way. My favorite one is A Horse and His Boy. And then Ricky likes Voyage of the Dawn Treader, and my oldest son Brian, he likes The Last Battle. And Brianna hasn't read those yet, so I can't tell you what her favorite is, but those are important books. But on that same note, the Lord of the Rings series. We all read those. I have not read The Hobbit. The boys have. They enjoyed it. Brian really likes The Silmarillion. All of those are Tolkien. Brian and I argue about how to say it. Tolkien, whatever. You guys know what I'm talking about. His books, all really good, but Lord of the Rings series is a necessity in our house. Henty novels are not all necessities, but one that is the Caribou Pasties. We do that when we study ancient Egypt. I love that book. It is Ricky's second favorite book. Brian really enjoyed that book. Brianna has not read it yet, but it's a great book. That's really a high school level book in my opinion. Kids that are really into reading can read it younger, but there's so much depth in there that I really like to wait until we can really discuss everything in that. So anyway, Caribou Pasties. Up from Slavery, Booker T. Washington. Absolutely love that book. Again, I think that's more obviously when you're discussing civil rights, fabulous. I just can't even say enough about that. In addition to the fact that it's important in terms of the American Civil Rights Movement, I also think it's important in terms of a work ethic. Because Booker T. Washington talked about the importance of an education, but not just the actual education, but the working towards an education, because his students actually made their own bricks to build their own buildings. And I think that teaching your children a good work ethic is incredibly important. So these are the things that we point out with these books. Jane Eyre is my absolute all-time favorite book. I like classic literature, and so I made all of my children read it, including my boys. And I think that there are some character values to be learned from Jane, who had lots of temptations to do things that she felt were wrong, and instead fought to do things that she felt were right. And so we discussed that. We read Jane Austen. Why? Because I love it. That's all there is to it. I made my boys read it. There you go. Everybody's read Pride and Prejudice, except for Brianna. She hasn't read it yet, but she will. She will. And again, these are high school level books, these last ones, but The Good Earth. The Good Earth is the very last book that you read in my house, and that is because there is a lot of content in it that's more adult in nature. However, I think there are many excellent lessons to be learned from The Good Earth. If you've not read it, you need to read it. You definitely need to read The Good Earth. In terms of poetry, I don't have any kind of specific thing. We usually just kind of find poetry that works for us. There's a lot of great poetry units on Pinterest. In the past, I've used different little small books that we've gotten from thrift stores in terms of poetry. We've had co-op classes on poetry, and so that's what we've used for poetry. And if I was picking a particular actual reader series, like one of the curriculums, I really like the Pathway readers. I think those are excellent, and we've done a lot of those. Grades 6 and 8 are two of my favorites. And I taught Ricky with the grades 1 and 2 how to read. So Pathway readers I think are excellent, and also an alternate would be the Sunlight books. I definitely think the Sunlight book list is great. There are a lot of books on the Sunlight list that I could have named in addition to these that we have done, but those aren't necessarily mandatory. These are the ones that I think are absolutely 100% mandatory for a reading list. So how did I find the list? These are things that I've read that I felt are important. I made it with what I love and what I think has value to my children. And how big is the list? Well, you just heard it. So there's more that, like I said, than that. There are a lot of other great books, and I want to make sure everybody's reading regularly. But these are the ones that we fill in. And so how do we do it by grade? I kind of don't do it by grade. I think anybody who's homeschooled for a length of time understands that you really just do it by ability. So whenever I feel that they're ready for a certain book, that's when we hit it. And Brian was reading large books in 2nd grade. He was reading like 500-page books in 2nd grade. Some of the books that Brian read in 2nd grade, Ricky and Brianna won't get to till like 8th grade. And it's just because they're not big readers. And, you know, Ricky's really into, as you know, manga and anime. And so even some of those have been helpful. It just depends on your perspective, and I can't name any of them for anyone because I don't think they're anywhere near as valuable as the list that I just gave you. But I think that some of them can be just as good as other books. So it really just depends on your perspective. How many at a time? For a long time, they were reading books on their own, and then we had a reader that we did as a family. Like, we would have reading time together at night. We don't do that so much anymore. Alas, it's fallen by the wayside, and I miss it. I do. It's one of those casualties of children getting older, but everybody's working and in college except for Brianna. But even Brianna's busy with lots of activities, so that's how it used to be when they were all younger. But now it's not happening that way. Now it's just us reading together during the day. So how do you get your reading done? Right now it's just Brianna and I during the day, and we get it done. There's nothing special about that. I don't have any annual goals. I don't sit down and say we're going to get through this many books. I think it's more important to actually go through the books and discuss them and make sure we understand what's happening in them, and that I'm hitting all of the values and important things that I think need to be covered. So it really just depends on their reading ability and how quickly they pick it up, and whether or not we need to use other materials to support it. If nothing is getting done, though, if it's a matter that nobody's reading and is just being lazy, then I'll start to enforce it and say you need to do this many chapters in this week, and we will talk about it. And I make sure it happens. I mean, there's just no getting around that. We did do Book It. because their question was rewards or incentives. We did do book it when the kids were younger. Of course, they're too old for that now. I don't know that I use any rewards or incentives for the kids to read. We have always gone to the library. And especially when they were younger, we went weekly. I mean, it was on schedule. Whatever day Rick was off, because he didn't have a regular schedule, we went to the library. And we would get books and we would get movies, and it was a fun place and it was an exciting place. And we didn't take our kids lots of places because, you know, if you watch my videos, you know we're frugal. And so we weren't traveling all the time. So going to the library was an exciting, fun thing. And getting to bring books home was like bringing gifts home. So that was the incentive. The incentive was we let them go to the library and get loads of books and stack them up, and they could look at whatever they wanted, and everybody would love to rush home and look at their books, and all week and be like, what are you reading? No, what are you reading? And that was the incentive. That was the fun, that everybody was doing it together. So I didn't do any other rewards. I felt like that was reward in and of itself, although in the summertime, our library systems usually have a summer reading program, and they enjoyed that. And of course, sometimes our co-ops had things where they read the same book together and got to discuss it and do activities, and that was a reward in and of itself too. So that's that. Do I quiz? I don't do a formal quiz. There are times that I will go on Pinterest and look for materials to go with whatever book that we're reading, and depending on what's out there, I may or may not find something. I was surprised how little I found for Little Women, which is a beloved book series, and yet there's so little out there. But I don't quiz like a formal written quiz. I don't think it's necessary. I think with books, it's really more important that you can discuss it than actually memorize the facts. I do talk a lot about vocab. A lot of these books that I've mentioned have pretty strong vocabulary. If you've ever tried to read through Jane Eyre, the very first time I read it in 9th grade, and I have a pretty high reading comprehension, I had to read it with a dictionary because there are a lot of words in there that, you know, you don't use lugubrious very often in your regular life. So anyway, those kinds of things, I do make sure I cover vocab, but it's not really kind of a test form. It's just us discussing, you know, oh, in this chapter you're going to hit these words and you need to understand what they mean, and when we hit them, let's break out the, did you understand what that meant in context? If you didn't, let's grab the dictionary and see what does that word actually mean. Oh, okay, can you see this? So, and of course there's a lot of French in Jane Eyre as well, which the boys, Brian has always enjoyed studying French. So, because he's a real big fan of Dumas. So he kind of was able to look it up. Ricky could care less what it was, so I had to explain to him what it was. And Brianna is studying French, so it's actually kind of going to support her French studies, even though we haven't hit it yet. So anyway, that is how we do reading lists. I don't subscribe to any kind of Charlotte Mason. I'm really such an independently minded person. I mean, I look at curriculum. I definitely work within it because I think there's a value in the fact that people have put these things together and they've worked for years for large groups of children. But I have a really solid grasp of what I think is important and what's actually necessary and required by the states and universities. So I just go with that, and so far so good. It's worked for me. I think if nothing else, I've said this before, if you do nothing else in your homeschool, then you should definitely be reading and doing math. Those are the two things that are like, those are the basics. So like when my kids the first year that I pulled Ricky out, he'd already been to public school and private school, and he couldn't read. So the very first year I homeschooled him, that was in the state of Maryland when he was very young, I pretty much just spent the whole year focused on reading because I figured he couldn't do anything else if he couldn't read. And he learned to read, and he learned to read well. Now he enjoys reading. In fact, he wants to be a writer. So I mean, an artist as well, but he wants to make books. So it's really one of those things that you really should focus on that, and reading, writing, those are all communication skills, and you know what they say about homeschoolers and their communication skills. So anyway, a lot of rambling, but that's how we do reading lists. I hope that was helpful to you. I hope it helped you to actually get an idea of some books that you could read. Maybe you didn't know about all those books. And I also hope it helped you to feel more free, that you don't have to like go straight down a list and check everything off, or your child's not going to be well prepared for college. They will be. They will be. Just let them read. Let them read whatever they want. As long as they're reading, you're in good shape. So, and well, not whatever they want, watch that. But The second I say that, it's gonna get wild. But anyway, you guys have a wonderful day. Don't forget to pray for Trish, and I will see you next time.